Hi, my name is Kerry and welcome to my channel. Today I am bringing you my June reading wrap up. So in June I actually read 15 books, which is a bit of a record for me. I don't usually manage anywhere near that many, but because I had quite a bit of time off work, I'd worked some extra hours, so I was able to take those back as leave, and I just spent a lot of that time reading because I didn't have anything or very much else planned. So yeah, so I read 15 books. Of those books, 5 were books I'd borrowed from the library or from friends and family. 3 were books that I'd bought this year. 2 were rereads. 1 was a book of poetry and 2 were books of non-fiction. And due to, sorry, that was a fly, breaking down into how I rated these books, there were 5 3-star books, 8 4-star books and 2 5-star books. There was also 1 book which I DNF'd. I also ticked off 1 more country on my Read Around the World challenge, which was Syria, so that was good. So far this year, my Goodreads total, I've got you on my Goodreads reading challenge, is 50 books. My target for the year is 78 books. So each year I base my target on the amount I read the previous year plus 1. So in 2017 I read 77 books, so this year I'm aiming for 78 on my Goodreads challenge. I'm actually hoping to hit a few more than that by the end of the year, but as I say, at this stage of the year I've read 50, which means I'm actually 12 books ahead of schedule, which is quite exciting because it means I can tackle some of the longer books that I've been putting off because I was trying to keep up. But as I say, I've read 15 books this month, which has really got me quite far ahead. Some of these are quite short ones, but that's fine. So to the books, and now I've seen a couple of booktubers do it this way of starting with your least favourite books of the month and working through to favourites. So that's the order I'm going to show you these books, because I just think that's fun and ends the wrap up on a high. So I'm going to start with a book that I DNF'd. This is a book called Single by Margaret Clarkson. This book was given to me by my aunt a couple of years ago. She was having a clear out, and she thought I might like it because I am single. I managed about half of it, but wasn't really enjoying it, not really finding it helpful, and I thought, you know what, I don't really need to read this. It's also a little bit dated. It was published in 1980, so yeah, some of the attitudes in it not quite up to date. So that book I did not finish. So on to my 3-star books. As I say, some of these books I borrowed from people and I've actually returned them, so if I can figure out how to, because I'm still very new at this, I will put a picture of them on the screen when I get to those ones. So the first book that I gave 3 stars to was The Power by Naomi, Alderman. This was a book I borrowed from the library. I was really excited to read this. A couple of my friends have really raved about it, and I wanted to love it, but I really didn't. I thought the concept was brilliant, and the exploration of the themes of abuse of power. So the premise of the book is that women suddenly develop this ability to give out electric shocks of varying strength, and the book is bookended by a male historian from sometime in the future, a long time after this has happened, saying, oh, in the past men were in charge and this is the situation that made women come to be in charge. So it's very interesting the way it was written and have that framing of it, but it was just really brutal. Some quite graphic violence in there, so trigger warnings for that, for sexual assault as well, and all described in quite graphic detail. And so I got to the end and I was glad that I'd read it, but I wouldn't want to read it again. If you don't mind sort of the graphic violence, that sort of thing, then you might really enjoy this book. If you're into your feminist books, then you might really enjoy this book, but it goes with the warning of it is quite graphic in places. The second 3-star book I read this month was No Longer Strangers by Richard Stoll. He is actually a guy from my church, an older chap, really lovely chap, and I bought this a couple of years ago. He's self-published a number of books, and this one's quite short, is I think the shortest one he's written. It was a really sweet story, but you could tell it was written sort of as a hobby. It was nice. It was just nice. The next book that I gave 3 stars to was a collection of poetry, which is Jane Austen poems and favourite poems. So this starts with some poems written by Jane Austen in letters, mainly, or in her journals, different events in her life, and then the second half are extracts of poems that she refers to in her books and other writings. And the note section at the end actually was really helpful in giving the context of where these poems appear in her novels particularly. So some of these poems I really liked, some I didn't really love, or they're just sort of, that's classic poetry. I think probably on rereading I would maybe give it a higher score, and what I've decided to do from now on with volumes of poetry, whether they're collections like this one or entirely by the same poet, I'm now putting tabs in on the poems I really like to remind myself, because by the time I got to the end of this I couldn't remember which poems I'd liked and which ones I wasn't as fussed about. So I think I'm going to keep this one. I don't usually keep books I give 3 stars to, but I'm going to keep this one with the aim of rereading it, maybe keeping it as a reference guide for when I'm rereading Jane Austen's novels, so that I can look up the poem she's referring to and just give myself that extra bit of context. The next book I gave 3 stars to is called The Meerkats of Summer Farm. This is a true story about a small wildlife centre in Devon. So they have a meerkat colony, and these 2 baby meerkats were abandoned by their mother and rescued by the owner of the wildlife park and hand-reared. It was quite a fun little story. I think I was given it for a birthday a few years ago, and it was quite enjoyable, but again it's not the best written book, but it was some were quite fun stories in there, and yeah, it was okay. The next book I gave 3 stars to was Margaret Sets a Trap. This is the Inspector Margaret series. I think this is actually the 48th in the series. There are quite a lot of them. It's the only one I've read so far. This one was one that my dad read and passed on to me. The problem I had with this book was, as you can see, it's a TV adaptation version, so I've actually seen the TV adaptation of this before I read the book, and that meant that a lot of the suspense of this story was lost on me because I already knew how it was going to turn out, and for this particular story, the tension of not knowing who the murderer was is the driving force behind the story. So because I already knew and remembered quite well how the story played out when I saw it on TV, I didn't enjoy this as much as I maybe could have, but I will certainly look up more from the series. But this one, as I say, was slightly spoilt for me by having seen it on TV. So that was all the 3-star books. On to the 4-star books, and the first 4-star book I finished this month was called A Time of Love and Tartan by Alexander McCall Smith. Again, this was one I borrowed from the library. It is in the Scotland Street series. I can't remember what number they're up to, possibly number 12. So these are stories based around the characters who are inhabitants of a building in Edinburgh, 44 Scotland Street, and the novels are collections of very short excerpts that are published in a daily newspaper in Scotland, and then every so often they're all bound together into the next novel in the series. So as I say, we're up to, I think it was book 12 in the series. So there's a lot of different characters who are very entertaining. My favourite, I think most people's favourite, is Bertie, who's a little boy who has a very overbearing mother, and he's just delightful. And the situations he gets in with some of his friends who are quite annoying. I think by the time of this book he's about 8, but he's just adorable. And again, this is a very light-hearted, very fun, nice, quick, easy read. If you haven't checked out the Scotland Street series, the first one's called 44 Scotland Street. They are really fun books, and just a real slice of Edinburgh life. The next book that I gave 4 stars to was Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. This is my favourite of the Poirot novels that I've read so far. It was one I actually forgot that I had, so I found it on my shelf. I was like, oh, I really need to read that. I was having a day, it was when I was in the middle of reading The Power, and I was having a bit of a down day, and I just wanted something, say light, it's a murder mystery, but you know what I mean, something less intense than The Power to read. And I love Agatha Christie for that. It's a great palate cleanser. She writes just these really intricate and clever stories, and I'm working my way through all the Agatha Christies that I own currently, most of which were passed on to me by my dad. And as I say, this is my favourite of the Poirot runs I've read so far. Not my favourite Agatha Christie of all time. I really like some of her standalones just because they're a little bit more interesting. But yeah, this is a really good one. If you've not read any Agatha Christie, not read any Poirot, this is a good place to start. The next book I finished is a book called Vanishing and Grace by Philip Yancey. This was one my dad lent me. It is a follow-up to his book What's So Amazing About Grace, and it's a reflection on how Christians are seen by non-Christians essentially in the world, because Christianity is meant to be good news, but we're often don't come across that way. We're often better known for the things that we stand against than the things we stand for, and that is a really sad situation. So this was a really interesting book for me about how we can sort of be more graceful and show love to people more than we show the things that we're against. So that was a really good book, and I was grateful for my dad for lending it to me. The next 4-star book I finished this month was 1,000 Perfect Notes by C.G. Drews, known on Twitter as Paper Fury. She's an excellent blogger, and this is her debut novel. I have been eagerly awaiting this book and bought it as soon as it came out, and just am still in love with this beautiful cover, which opens out to be a butterfly on both sides. It's just gorgeous. This book is about Beck, who is he's a pianist, but only because his mother forces him to. She used to be a concert pianist, but through illness is not able to anymore, so she makes Beck live out her dream for her, and he basically is getting to the point where he hates his life, he hates music, and then a girl called August comes into his life, and slowly things start to change for him. This was beautifully written, really engaging, really great debut from C.G. Drews. So if you haven't picked it up yet, it's highly recommended. The next 4-star book I read this month was a reread of one of my childhood favourites, and this was The Wreck of the Zanzibar by Michael Morpurgo. This is a really cute story about a young girl living on the Isles of Scilly back in the early 20th century. And her brother goes away to sea, and the island falls on hard times. Michael Morpurgo is one of the best children's authors alive, so I love his books, and I'm trying to work through some of the ones that I own of his. So as I say, this was a child favourite that I reread this month. The next 4-star book, so just checking my notes, that I read this month was another library book that I borrowed called Broken Homes by Ben Aaronovitch. It is the 4th book in the Peter Grant series. So Peter Grant is a London policeman who also finds out he's a wizard, and becomes part of a team within their Metropolitan Police who deal with supernatural occurrences and crimes. This was a really strong one from the series. So if you haven't read them, the first book in the series is called Rivers of London. Really, really good. If you're into mystery stories, crime stories, or fantasy stories, sort of urban fantasy, you'll really enjoy this series. The next 4-star book I finished this month was Death in the Seaside by Alison Moore. This was our Ninja Book Club book pick for the month of June. This was not what I was expecting at all. I thought from the title it was going to be a nice cozy little seaside murder mystery, but it was so much better than that. It's about Bonnie, who is pretty much failing at everything she tries in life. She's just turning 30 and made to move out of her parents' house, and she moves into a flat. Her landlady is a lady called Sylvia Slythe, who is not all she seems, and it's quite a good little suspense novel, and really enjoyed it. It was we had a really good chat about it on our Facebook book chat as well, so if you're interested in joining our book club, I'll put the link down below, and a bit later I'll get on to what our pick for July is, but yeah, this is really, really good, and as I say, not what I expected, but so much better than I expected. And finally, the last 4-star book I read this month was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This was my first Patrick Ness book and I loved it. I know it's been made into a movie as well. This is actually a movie edition I borrowed from the library, so I'll be checking out the movie soon, but I just thought this was beautifully written, really atmospheric. It's about a boy called Connor whose mother has cancer, and he's trying to come to terms with the idea that he might lose her. He doesn't have a great relationship with his dad or his grandmother, who are the other key figures who are trying to support him, and he feels like he's become sort of invisible at school. And then this monster shows up and says the monster will tell him 3 stories, but then once he's finished the 3rd story, Connor has to tell the monster a story, and it has to be a true story. I thought this was really powerful, really beautifully written, and I'll definitely be reading some more Patrick Ness, so this was really, really good. So finally we're on to my 5-star reads. The first one of these was a reread. It's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So much love for this book. So much love for Jane Austen. I'm actually trying to reread all her books. Last year was the 200th anniversary of her death, and since then I've been trying to read through all of her books, so this was my penultimate one. I've just got Emma left to go, which is my favourite. This is just a classic. I don't really need to say too much about it because I think most people by now know the story. If you haven't read it, really, really read it. And finally, my favourite book of the month and my favourite book so far this year is Shatila Stories. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. This is a collection of short stories that have been woven together, written by Syrian and Palestinian refugees in the Shatila refugee camp in Lebanon. Some of them have grown up there their whole lives, and some of them have recently arrived there due to the situation in Syria. And this book was commissioned by the publisher Perrine Press, and they actually went out there and did a writing workshop with these refugees, and then the writers then had to send over their short stories, and the editors then wove it in together into more or less one narrative. So some of the same characters appear throughout. It is so beautiful. Really gives you a sense of what life is like in one of these camps. Highly recommend it. You can buy it from the Perrine Press website, and they donate 50p from every sale of the book to a charity, and they work with refugees in the camp. I'll put the link down to both the Perrine website where you can buy this and the charity website in the description box below. So this is my favourite book of the year so far and my best book of June. Really highly recommend it. Go and buy it. Perrine are also an independent publisher, so it's really good to support them as well. Right, so that's all the books I read in June. I'm not going to be making TBR videos because I am A, too ambitious, and B, don't stick to them. So I'm just going to round off each wrap up with some of the books I'm hoping to get to in the month. I'm actually doing the Tome Topple challenge at the moment, which is for 2 weeks. It started on the 29th of June and is running till the 12th of July, I believe, which is attempting to read books of over 500 pages that are taking up space on your TBR and on your bookshelves. So for that, at the moment, I'm reading The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. I'm just over 100 pages into this. It's just over 700 pages long. I'm mostly enjoying it so far. I think it will take me a little while to get into this. And while I'm still on the Tome Topple, a couple of other books that I'm hoping to get to might or might not, haven't quite decided which ones I'm going to go for yet, are Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, which is the first book in the Illuminae files. Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, which has been going around BookTube. It's a really highly rated book this year, so I'm hoping to get to that. And finally, Westward Ho by Charles Kingsley. You can't actually see the name on there, maybe you can see it on the spine. A couple of other books that I'm going to try and get to in the month of July. First of all, we've got our Ninja Book Club pick for the month of July, which is called The Woman in the Shadows by Carol McGrath. All our book club books are picked by poll, so we all anyone can suggest books, and then Bex, who organises it, puts a poll together and we vote, and this was the book that won for this month. So looking forward to that. It sounds really amazing. And finally, the last book that I'm hoping to get to in the month of July is Undivided, which is Vicky Beeching's memoir, and this was bought for me on the Buy a Stranger a Book day hosted by Big Green Bookshop, so check them out on Twitter. This is her memoir of coming out as gay, having had a background as a Christian singer-songwriter and worship leader, and basically her experience of her life of trying to work out her faith and her sexuality. So excited to read this, so grateful it was bought for me. So looking forward to getting to that one this month. I'd hoped to read it in June for Pride Month, but I didn't quite get there. So that's a couple of books that I'm hoping to get to in the month of July. This has turned out to be quite a long video, so I'm going to sign off now. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this. Chat to me in the comments if you've read any of these books or want to read any of these books. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye!